Take nothing away from it. It's done you no good, and I've not done my job as a presenter for you. Won't tell you the things that will get you compromised on your internal network 100% of the time, and the attacker gets onto your network. We're not going to be talking about external, just I'm going to say that up front. So a little bit about me. Who am I? I'm Nate McConnell. I work for Dell SecureWorks. I'm one of their RedTeam members. I specialize in application, network, and mobile security. So I'm generally not the guy that's going to be on site. I'm the guy sitting off-site, either breaking in remotely, working on a box that's on your network, or I'm tearing apart your mobile applications. Find me. I'm on Freenode. Usually hang out in the DC 801 channel. Handle is natedmac. It's also my Twitter. If you have questions, want to know anything after this, my email, nmcconnell@secureworks or natedmac@gmail.com. So first thing I want to do, who in here is responsible for your organization's security? Okay. Who in here works in IT for your organization? Pretty much everybody. So to that first question though, every one of you are responsible for your organization's security. It doesn't matter if your official title has it or not. If you're an employee for an organization, you are responsible for security. So what this talk isn't covering, anything new, advanced, the new hotness. We're not going to talk about new attacks. We're not going to talk about new defense tactics. We're not covering anything super in-depth. The reason why, I don't need it. As I'm attacking a network as a RedTeam member, whether it be coming in physically, breaking in, whether it be I get in via a phish, whatever. I do not need to use exploits. I don't need to use anything super advanced on your network to actually compromise your data. What I use is very basic, simple attacks that are the tools that are already on your network to actually take over the rest of it. Where to begin? There's 3 tiers in my mind of what security is. You have information system security, you have your human aspect, and the physical aspect. With this presentation, we're focusing solely on information security. Reason being, and I'm going to try to explain this in such a way that makes sense, is that your human aspect, you cannot patch humans. You can't fix humans. You can't change humans. And the psychology about preying on a human being is so well documented, so well known, it doesn't matter. I will, every day of the week, phish someone in your organization. No questions asked. And you can assume that if I get one person to click on a link in your organization, I have a compromise and I have a foothold on your network. There's just no questions about it. The second thing about it is physical. With the physical security, the physical aspect, the problem you're going to face is there's 2 real dilemmas. One, there's no way to keep me out of your building unless you work in a nuclear missile silo that's buried under, 100 feet of earth. You have a vault door, armed guards, and there's only one ingress and egress point. Otherwise, if I really want in, I've got enough C4 and thermite, I'm coming through a wall. You have a door, I'm going to pull it off with a truck and a chain. I'm getting into your building. A brick through the window. Those are very destructive, violent attacks. But now let's go to the more softer side of human and physical security, such as tailgating. How many of you have ever held the door open for somebody to let them in? You're polite. How many times have you seen someone carrying a box? The FedEx guy, the UPS guy, walking into your building, carrying a couple of boxes. What do? Oh, here, let me help you in. You're polite. As an attacker, I love it. I'll do that all day, every day, walk onto your network, set those boxes down somewhere, go plug my device in on your network, and walk away. You won't see it. You won't know it's there. And now I've got an internal compromise. That is why for those two things, it's imperative that we focus on information security. Those two things are beaten every day. Information security has to be your strong point. There's no emotional, there's no ramifications, there's no instinctive response by a computer. It does exactly what you tell it to do. It's very binary. It's yes or no. Now, it may behave inappropriately because you told it to, or an attacker told it to, but it is doing exactly what it was told. Perfect example of this, though, is how physical security systems fail. Coworker of mine at a previous job, fairly tight building. They could not get in. Fairly locked down lobby. They couldn't get past the guards. So they combined the physical and the human aspect to pay a bum $50. Had the bum walk into this lobby, the far corner, start taking a piss everywhere. And what happens? Guards, staff, everybody comes running. All the other patrons took off. My coworker walked right behind them, walked right to the elevators, went right up in. It was game over at that point. They walked out with full access about 36 hours later with everything that they wanted because that one physical event. So here's why information security. If we don't focus on it, it doesn't matter. If you don't build your Fort Knox in such a way that you're protecting your assets, it doesn't matter. So we'll start why there's the failures. This is most organizations. It is a top-down approach. How many of you in here have to deal with compliance? Okay. How many of you in here have directives from management that say you have to secure your environment, you have to be secure, you have to make it so we don't have incidents? You know, compliance, as I said, it's not the problem, but it doesn't do anything for your security. I hate to say it, as a Red Team member, as an attacker, if you're PCI, your HIPAA, you've got your SOX compliance, it does nothing for your environment in such a way that it is going to stop me. It is very much wide open. That's what most security programs are focused on. And I'm going to give you this as an example. For most Fortune 100 companies I've worked with, billion-dollar, $500 billion companies, 90% of their security is still based on scanners. Nessus, Nexpos, here's how we scan it, here's how we know. This is what vulnerabilities we have. This is what our threats are. This is how we're gonna fall apart. Yet, 90% of the time, and where this talk started from, was that type of security model will not catch the things I will use as an attacker on your network to stop it. It will not catch it any day of the week. And then here's the other problem. How many of you in here have an unlimited budget? How many of you in here have a very small, tight budget that maybe you can buy a new product, or maybe you can upgrade that machine you need for your logging? Huh? Most of you? I would suspect so. You know, and the other problem, it's bolted on. How many of you in here built your environments from the ground up with security in mind? Or how many of you in here had something happen, something break? Oh wait, we need to put MFA on our VPN, or we need to put MFA on our external email. Or we have to set a stricter password policy because every user having the password of password, all lowercase, really, you know, it doesn't make sense. So we have to build it on. We bolt it on. It's not inherent in our environments. And that's why it kind of gets left wide open. So now, this is what is the failures. That's why. Now let's actually dive into some of the actual technical details of what these failures are. Things that I will exploit on a daily basis to actually compromise your network. How many of you in here have a switching infrastructure that you will turn up, you configure it, and then you go back and disable every port except the ones you need? You disable every port you don't need. Good. Because if you don't, I have free plug, free access. How many of you also actually configure your ports to only allow a specific MAC? If you don't do that, I'm going to unplug a device and do an inline. I'm going to put a little switch behind a printer, behind another PC, plug my devices in. If you're not locking that down, it's there. How about your DHCP? How many of you in here will actually do DHCP configs other than your carte blanche? Here, let's turn on DHCP from Microsoft. Oh, and I'm going to backstep 1 second here and say, a lot of this is very Microsoft focused. It has some bleed over into the open source, the Linux, FreeBSD types environments, the Mac environments. However, most corporations that I deal with, most networks I see and deal with out there, still have a fair amount of Windows on the network that I can use to at least gain enough of an access that if you have a Linux, Mac environment, it doesn't matter. I'll still have what I need to at least gain access to that environment and continue to move on. But anyways, your carte blanche DHCP. How many of you in here actually go through and really look at your DHCP config and configure it to say this IP can only get, or this MAC address only gets IPs in this range, or is statically assigned to MAC? And you do not hand it out unless it's there. Anybody? Okay, so now let's think about this. As an attacker, if I can find a place to plug in and I can pull DHCP, are you going to know I'm on your network? Are you going to see an alert in your DHCP logs that says, hey, we have a new device on the network? If not, start thinking about that. And everything I go through here, start thinking about it in your head. What would happen if I were to plug in on your network as I'm going through some of these things? What's going to happen if I start tearing it apart? The other thing about DHCP in the port config, it's not going to stop me. It's not guaranteeing to stop me. But those two things can make my life very miserable as an attacker, because that's that first foothold I need. Then if I can't physically get a device on your network, then the next question is I have to get a fish. I have to compromise a box on your network to be able to route traffic in and out of. Makes my job a lot harder. It's more likely I will get caught. The next one, this is one of my absolute favorite. Your network protocols. Who in here has a fairly predominant Windows shop or Windows network? Few of you. Okay, how many of you are in here are familiar with what NetBios is? Few of you. How many of you understand the technical depths of NetBios, that since it is a broadcast protocol, it is a very race condition prone protocol, that it can actually be used to compromise your entire network and every user on your network? How many of you were aware of that? So here's the fun thing with NetBios, is when a computer comes online, or when a computer is trying to connect to an SMB share, it needs to get proxy settings, whatever, it will first look at DNS. Then it looks at its local cache. If it cannot find what it's looking for there, it goes to NetBios. Here's the fun part about it is a broadcast. It says, hey, I'm looking for file server 01. I want to connect to you. And if I'm on the same segment and I'm quicker to respond as, yes, I'm file server 01. I control the challenges with that at that point. You're going to say, oh, I want to that computer's going to connect to me, but it's not going to get what it wants, but instead it sends me its hash. The user that's connecting, here's its hash. Here, we need to do this. And that now I control the NTLM. If I'm lucky, I can downgrade it to an LM hash. I am then able to crack that hash offline. I have your user's passwords. And I have not sent in a single attack or single exploit over the wire. Now the question's going to become is, will you be able to distinguish me using Joe in Accounting's password versus Joe in Accounting using his own password on your network? Will you be able to distinguish my traffic from his? That's just a very talk going on today about NetBios, the broadcast protocols, a tool that we use called Responder. That's a very in-depth technical on that. That's one piece. You know, how many of you in here actually also check your users' emails? Scan your users' emails for anything coming in and anything going out and store it. You do? That's impressive. I've seen Fortune 50 companies that don't, due to reasonable expectation of privacy, all these other things, that they just leave it alone. Prime example of this, we were doing an engagement for a company back east. In the users' emails were passwords, PIN and account information for their clients, and this was a financial institution. We grabbed that information out of this user's email. We were able to log into the internal tools and see all this client's information because of what was in that person's email. That included social security numbers, that included tax information, that included all the account details. It would have been enough for an identity theft, easily. It was also enough that by the end of that week, we had gained enough access, got enough foothold, we could have moved out over $100 million worth of cash to an offshore account and never would have been seen on this internal network. So, and this is, I would say, about a $990 billion company. They manage a ton of money. So 100 million for them would have been a drop in the bucket. That'll give you the size of the organization, and yet they still didn't see it. So start thinking about that. The next couple here are some of my absolute favorite. Who in here has ever ran a Tomcat server? One person, a couple people ran Tomcat. Do you know where the users are configured? It's a file called the users.xml within the Tomcat config directory. Nice thing about it, your passwords for all your users are in clear text. More times than not, I may not have interactive logon, full system access to that Tomcat box, but there's a good likelihood that it's the file permissions, file share permissions have been screwed up, and I'm able to just connect directly to it and pull that box up. If I've got it, okay, great. Now I've got the Tomcat users. Tomcat on Windows especially runs with system privileges. With a quick SMB, grab that user, log into Tomcat, deploy a new app, I've got a full shell. I can dump the hashes, I can dump everything, and likely since Tomcat is also an enterprise application using to host multiple apps, it's got someone that's logged in with elevated creds. A lot of times a domain admin. I'll pull domain admins from there. I've seen PHP configs where the root password for the database, they don't set their apps up correctly. They use root with the root password to the database. A lot of times people don't change their passwords across multiple databases. So the root password for one database is the same root password for every database. It's great, it's wonderful. The last one, wikis and SharePoints. How many of you in here have an internal wiki, an internal SharePoint, something that you use to document stuff? I would expect to see more hands than that. You don't document? Oh. Anyways, with wikis, SharePoints, you do document. How many of you ever have backed up a Cisco config to a wiki or SharePoint so that in case your Cisco router tanks, you can restore your config? How about here is the passwords for your SAN on some deep level hidden page that nobody really knows about. You got to click through about 20 different links to get to it. Oh, there it is. There's the password for the SAN. Or for other critical systems, you put some passwords in there just to document so you don't lose it. Because likely, unless you're a massively large organization, you're not running something like managed engines, password pools, or you have some other enterprise level password vault. It's more likely than not you're either putting them in a spreadsheet that's shared, or you're putting them in a config management place like this. And I promise you, if I'm on your network and I find a wiki or a SharePoint, I will spend a day, 2 days, 3 days going through that till I get every bit and every last document out of it, because it is likely I will find internal names of critical systems. I'll find where your infrastructure is. I'll find where you've got weaknesses. I'll find passwords. I'll find a treasure trove of information. It is the holy grail of information for your environment, right? So if, as an attacker, I can get to it, it's internal isn't set up with authentication, since only IT knows about it and only IT uses it. If you run an authentication, great, but likely not. So let's also go to some of my more fun ones. The administrative side of things. How many of you in here have ever tried to image 500 computers, 1,000 computers over the span of a weekend because you're rolling out a new image, you're setting up a new network, or you've got a very large user base and you have to be able to quickly re-image boxes? Anybody? A couple of you? How many of you in here actually monitor what happens when you do your PXE booting, your imaging? So this one's maybe a little more advanced, maybe a little more in depth, but it's one that in a larger enterprise environment you will see that is a wide open game for domain admin every single time. I will boot up my laptop, fire up a VM. I'll tell it to pixie boot off your network as I start to image and your image deploys. Generally speaking, what happens when you deploy an image? You kind of get it prepped, ready, and then what do? Especially if it's a Microsoft. Anybody know? What would be one of the next things you would want to do for that machine? Anybody? What's that? No. How about join it to the domain? So that a user can be done with, once the image is complete, user can log right back in, they're up and running again, right? What is required to join a machine to the domain? Elevated or domain admin privileges. So here's the fun. Right as it's getting ready to join the domain, I pause my VM. Sitting in that memory file are the credentials for your domain admin or the elevated privileged account. I pull apart the memory, dump. I now walk out, I have domain admin creds. And that is usually something I test in an environment day one, maybe day two. Reason being is it's an easy win for me, but by show of hands, even if you're not doing it now, how many of you in here would have thought to monitor your pixie boot logs, your deployment logs? Yeah, I didn't think about this either until I actually saw these type of attacks happening. The other thing with imaging, you build a golden image. You deploy everything you need. Okay, well, your workstation support group needs to be able to fix a computer, quickly run tools on there. They don't want to transfer them back and forth. So what do? They put them in a hidden directory on the C drive, or they put them somewhere buried deep that, hey, we need to be able to quickly run these tools. So a user won't know they're there. I'm not going to point the finger that users are ignorant, but most users don't go poking around. But however, I will. If I gain access to one machine and I start poking around just a little bit, wait, here's this hidden directory that has all these systems tools, or you have system configuration scripts. A lot of times these scripts have hard-coded credentials in them so that they can run them and leave. Some of them will prompt. It just really depends on the organization. So, with that being said though, as an attacker, if I find that, can I use those credentials elsewhere? Can I use those scripts by tampering with them to do something else for me with elevated privileges? If so, great. If not, it's at least another thing I'm looking at, and it's something as admins and people involved in security, you need to be thinking about what you're actually putting in your images. What tools are you leaving behind? Another fun one, system configuration management tools. Anybody in here familiar with SCCM from Microsoft? So quick question for you. Do you go back and validate and clean up and remove all your packages after everything's deployed from the machines? No? Okay. Next question, have you ever pulled apart those packages? Because let's say you need to install something or a driver or that. What's required? Elevated privileges at least to the machine, and likely it's an account that gets used that is also linked to the domain. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. But there's an admin account that allows it to check in and log into SCCM. It allows it to do deploys to these machines. So, quick question, what do you think might happen if as an attacker I was able to compromise that? What's that? Very good. So, true life story. We were on an engagement. We pulled apart a package that was left behind on a machine, had the admin credentials for SCCM. Great. We went, rolled up our own shell, put it up there, deployed it. However, we goofed up our deployment, and I'll get to that in a minute. But we push out a shell to every server on the network, running as administrative privileges across the entire network. We won. However, we wound up killing ourselves by shooting ourselves in the foot. We goofed up our deploy, and we deployed to every machine. So Monday morning, when all the users came back in, logged back in, our poor server caught 5,000 more shells, and we couldn't handle it. We overwhelmed our interpreter instances with the amount of shells we had coming back because of SCCM. Just absolutely killed it. Bad day, bad time. And code tools. Who in here has ran Jenkins for code deployment and code testing? Are you familiar with the script console in Jenkins? No, well, there's a web interface. It's on the web interface, but there's a script console in the web interface that allows you to send Jenkins commands in, but you can also send operating system commands. How many of you in here actually lock your Jenkins down well enough that you require authentication to see it or use it? If you don't, I'm going to tell you right now, that is a 100% every day, every time when that I will have a shell on your box in one command. And I will have likely administrative privileges on that box. If it's a Windows box, almost guaranteed administrative privileges. And then I'm going to have somewhat elevated privileges based upon who ran and who launched the Jenkins, depending on how it was configured. I've seen other boxes where it's actually fairly locked down, but it is a surefire way to gain a shell. And just something fun for everybody to do, after this is all over and said and done, go to something like Shodan or go to Google, start doing a search out there, just some quick Google dorks, looking for Jenkins instances out there on the web. Then see if you can see that script console. Don't send anything, just look. Just get an idea. Last I looked, I saw several thousand Jenkins instances sitting out on the internet with the script console exposed. Every one of those boxes is a guaranteed shell because I can send operating system commands. Anyways, so here's an example of how, as an attacker, I'm going to give you an end-to-end perspective of what I would do with some of what I talked about. This will give you an idea. Now, what I want you all to actually consider as I'm discussing these attacks is, will you be able to detect and respond? Will you be able to know I'm actually there? I'm also spending a blanket fish to a majority of the users. We're going to send macros. We're going to get you to click links. We may send 5 or 6 different emails based upon the needs of the organization and what our intelligence and our recon that we've gathered in the weeks leading up to this. Also, my guys, boots on the ground, are walking in, physically compromising your building. And like I said up front, those two always win. One of the guys on my team that is our physical security specialist, I have yet to see him be able to get into any location he wants. One time prior to when I started with Dell and have heard about this, he got caught. That was at a very secured facility. He wound up laying on the ground with his hands over his head, with ARs pointed at him for 2 hours while they validated his identity. Other than that, if he wants in your building, he's getting in. And I'm going to get a fish. So now, once we're in, we have that foothold. We have that basic connectivity. I'm going to start using, like I said, Responder, your network broadcast protocols. I'm looking for hashes on your network. Once I capture a couple of hashes, I send them off-site. I've got a big 25 GPU cracking rig that I have access to. So how many of you, your passwords in here are over 20 characters? Couple of you? How about all your users? Do you set a 20 character password minimum? No? Okay. Well, then what's the likelihood that that password is going to get cracked? Because most users are, oh wait, this is summer 2015. Oh wait, I have to have specials, exclamation, exclamation. Oh wait, I had to have a capital. Let's just capitalize the first one. So now I've got my capital. I'm over my 10 character limit. I've got my special characters, and I've got some numbers in there. I got a pretty good strong password. Yeah? You're exactly right. What I'm saying though is, I ask, how many of you have a strong password? That's where technology like password vaults, using something like a key pass, Those types of things come in. Or, long passphrases that users can remember. I hate to say, the XKCD comic of the correct horse battery staple. A long password that's fairly easy for a human to remember, but is computationally difficult because it continues to grow in length. Because every time you increase that key space by 1, you're drastically increasing the time length for me to brute force that or crack that password. Is there a surefire answer? No. And in all honesty, passwords probably need to just die. We need to come up with a better authentication mechanism. That being said, a longer, stronger password that isn't written down is ideal. But more likely than not, users will use simple, easy to use passwords that will go the minimum length required, or they may go slightly over, and it's fairly predictable. Almost every time I see passwords in an organization, there's the common mutations, a 3 for an E, a $sign for an S, things like that. Almost always the first letter is capitalized. And if they have to have special symbols, it's generally exclamation points at the end. It's just human nature. Once I grab hashes, once I crack those and I have passwords, I'm going to start hopping from box to box to box in your network, looking for other things. I'm going to start looking at what's available in your group policies. There's things that are hidden in group policy that I can find. There are hashes on other boxes. I'm going to start trying to fish users from inside your own network. Once I start getting a foothold, I'm jumping box to box, dumping more hashes. I crack those. Oh wait, I found one of your developers' hashes. Now I log into a development server or his workstation. He probably has a little bit more level of access across the network than your receptionist, than your, the sales guy. Now I can get to your code repository. How many of you in here are a true software shop? What would happen if I got your code repository and that leaked? It'd be kind of bad. But also likely, there's a good chance that your development servers, your code management servers, have had someone that's logged in that has elevated privileges. Find a domain admin, one of your IT support staff that has even more access across the network. I grab those hashes, I crack those. I continue to pivot and jump through your network. All the while, I have yet to fire a single exploit. I don't nmap on an internal network. I don't run ports, vulnerability scanners. The most I will ever do is do a couple of pings, a couple of NetBios scans, blending in with the noise. If it's a really locked down and hardened environment, I may run an nmap for a very targeted port at one system, and I'll wait 10 minutes. I'll jump to another box, run number 2. Trying to stay stealthy. But the moment I can grab domain admin hashes, grab private keys off of a box, you name it, at that point, it's just a matter of time before I find what I'm looking for. And then I'm exfilling it back out, whether it be through 3G modems, whether it be through another box I've compromised, or if I've got a big enough SD card on my box that I've dropped on your network, I'll have my guy on the ground go back in and pull that box back out. Yeah?
What if an organization has two-factor authentication implemented? Are you still able to send an application back to me?
Absolutely. Unless everything internally is all two-factor auth, then it gets a little more difficult. We'll have to start looking for misconfigurations, start looking for systems that have been forgotten, going from there. But even so, in hundreds of organizations I've dealt with, I have not ever seen anyone implement full 2FA or multi-factor auth on their internal network because of an old mindset of we secure the perimeter, we harden it down, and everything kind of left inside if they're in their end is what that is. And then at this point, with where I am in my attack, I'm walking out with all your data, with whatever I came to find. Now the question is, with what I was just talking about, who in here thinks they would actually detect me? Who in here thinks they would actually notice the anomalies in their traffic or in their server communications that they would detect an attacker on their network? Who in here is logging enough and looks at it enough that they honestly feel that they could stop an advanced attack using basic attack tools on their network? And so that's kind of where this comes. So what does any of what I just told you have to do with your organization? What does any of what I've just told you about matter? Any idea? It doesn't. I'll kind of discuss here in a minute how to fix some of those other problems, kind of what you need to do. But here's the thing. If I just give you here's how to fix these problems, give you the carrot, and tell you, here, go fix this, this, and this, right? What happens when the new hotness comes out and becomes a very basic attack? Will you catch that? Will you notice that? So I need to work with you here to kind of pull a paradigm shift. Let's fix the core fundamentals. There's offensive discussions, defensive discussions going on at this conference. What does any of those matter? If I can't give you a way to fix the core underlying issues in it, it doesn't matter what I do, what anybody does. Your environment's not built in such a way to be able to detect an attack and respond to it. With the new mobility and the way everything's going, where is your perimeter now? How many of you in here have used a cloud-based solution? Does that fall inside your network perimeter? Is that hardened by your network controls? Do you have 100% guaranteed trust in your cloud provider, your SaaS-based provider, that they are 100% secure? No, I don't. I've ran clouds. I ran big public clouds. And I can tell you it's not 100% secure. I've been at little companies, and as I look back, there are days I want to go back to my old companies and say, hey, look, guys, I'm sorry. I really screwed up here. Let me fix this the right way for you. Because knowing these networks, and with the knowledge I've gained now, it's like eye-opening. But the first thing I want to say, got to get one thing out of the way, and we're going to talk about the blame game. I hate to say it. I don't want to hear anybody that's in this room, if I talk to you again, don't ever tell me it's a user's fault. You do that, I'm going to turn around and walk away. Not trying to be rude, not trying to be mean, but we as an industry have got to stop blaming users. They know they're going to get phished. We know they're going to let someone walk in behind them. They're going to let someone tailgate them. It just happens. Now, as an administrator, as a person that runs your network, shouldn't your job be to defend it and keep me, the attacker, from being able to go from where, Susie sitting at the front desk who I just phished, and now I have a little bit of access to her box? Shouldn't it be your job to prevent me from being able to get up there? I don't want to say there's no way to completely harden a network internally. There's no way to prevent a user at some point from being able to go from here to here. Your job is to make that so difficult that I make mistakes. The thing about it is if I'm on your network, I am going to make mistakes for the first couple of days. I'm going to try to access a resource. I'm going to try to view something I don't have permissions to. Your job to find and see those anomalies. Not your user's job to be 100% locked down. They're not robots. They don't focus binary. They're emotional. That is why we need to take and defend at a binary level and not try to stop users. Because it's always going to happen. So we as an industry, I'm just as guilty. We have to be better at taking the blame away from users. Yes, they should be better. Yes, they can be better. But no, we got to stop blaming them for our compromises. We need to start taking that onus on ourselves. So where do we go from here? Any ideas what next steps would be? What compromise it and take everything you own? What do we do? First thing, stop. Step back. Go to your management, go to your business stakeholders. Find what the goal to your environment is. We're going to build a Fort Knox, right? We want to secure it. What are you securing? Your gold. How many of you in here could tell me every piece of critical data on their network, where it's located, the permissions surrounding it, and how locked down it is in such a way, that they would know exactly where this is, you're locked down, and say, okay, this is where my gold sits. This is where I have to be the most secure. Anybody know where all your employee data is? Because guess what? I may not get your credit card data, but can I compromise all your employees' data? Let's say you're a big billion, $2 billion, $20 billion company. Let's say you've got 20,000 employees, 30,000 employees. That's quite a lot of identities I can steal. And that includes their healthcare information, which means I can turn around and resell their healthcare information. If you're a software shop, where is your code? Because let me ask, how many of you in here, if you lost your code and it went basic, public, open sourced because of an attacker, how many of you in here as a software shop would like that? Credit card. Same thing. How many of you in here would have credit card data get leaked if there was a compromise like that? Again, it's the same thing. You need to know where it's at. Then the next thing, you need to find out your business stakeholders, not just you as IT, but your accounting, your marketing, your executives. What keeps them up at night? What worries them about your environment? Yeah, we've got all this stuff and it's sitting on all these laptops, or here's all of our competitive market analysis. If we lose that, now this starts to sound a little bit like IT. You got to understand where all that data is, what's critical. Find all of that and then document it. You need to go sit down with all your stakeholders, put them in a conference room and say, look, here's all this data. This is where it's at. Now let's protect it. Get them all to buy off and sign off on it. Because if you continue with the status quo, nothing will change. Your environment will be still wide open, ripe for the taking. Because you don't know where your own gold is. You don't know how to lock down your own environment. How do we reach this better state? Once you know where this is, go to management and say, look, here is every bit of that gold. I know exactly where it is. We've moved data, we've moved servers. We know it's all right here. Can I get you guys to say, yes, let's fix it? Get them to buy off on it. Ask them, how would your company survive if you were the next Ashley Madison breach? All your users' data was leaked. How would you survive if you were Target or Home Depot? How would you survive if your source code was completely leaked? Would your business partners, the other businesses you work with, still continue to go? Would your customers still still come here? You know, you're a Target or a Home Depot, there's limited choices. But if you're just, let's say, a small mom and pop IT shop, and there's a couple of other competitors out there, and your credit card and all your information was leaked, as a customer, it's likely they're going to go elsewhere. How's your business going to handle that? You need to ask these kind of questions. Once you have it, and you know, okay, this is how it is, and you put that fear of God in your management, that if we screw this up, we go out of business. I lose my job, everybody else loses their job. You know, and if you're a healthcare company, are you held personally liable? Under some of the HIPAA laws now, healthcare executives can be held liable for gross negligence and serve actual jail time. With the new PCI 3.0 standards coming out, guess what? It is no longer onus on the bank. If there is gross negligence or a failure to do their part correctly, vendors can be held liable. So Target's insurance, the banks kind of took care of everything, kind of all got swept under the rug. How would Target handle having to pay for credit monitoring, the loss of everything, and then the loss of all the merchandise paid for and stolen by those fraudulent cards? Could they? Likely not. They're a big company, and that would still put a huge dent in their revenue stream. You need to ask those kind of questions. Once you have it, map out your security needs to larger projects. How many of you in here have ran an old SAN that needed upgraded? Or had old servers, old domains that needed upgraded? Why not, when you're upgrading, increase your budget a little bit and do security right? Sit down and actually map your security needs to these projects and build it in. Now you've built in your security instead of bolted it on top. You're doing it at a time when it's already being rebuilt, so it's now done correctly and more securely. Plus it makes everybody's job a little bit easier in the end, and it continues to run better. And I'm sorry, like I said this at the beginning, I'm going to say it again. Even if your job title doesn't say security in it, it is your job as an employee of wherever you work for security. Whether that be being cognizant of phishing emails, making sure that you're setting strong passwords. You see something that just doesn't look right, doesn't feel right, report it to management. Go to upper management and say, look, this doesn't feel right. This just looks wrong. Let's fix it. Continue to be that squeaky wheel on those types of issues. They'll get fixed. They'll get resolved. That is your job as a user, and even more so if you're an IT person. You need to be going and complaining to management. Here's the true recipe to success: documentation. You have to know everything about your environment. I want to know what port a device is plugged into, what MAC address it is. I want to know what's the base configuration, what's running, what ports are open. Have so much detail on this that if you see one minor variance, you know you have a breach because it's out of the normal, or you have a user that's done something stupid and messed up their machine. And the thing about this is, and I forgot to mention it a little bit ago, we need to change this mindset from operating in a responsive mode to operating in a mode of we are at 24/7 compromise. It's an always compromised environment. And we need to continuously react in such a way that if there's something like that varies from the norm, it's a breach until we can prove otherwise. Because if not, you're not going to see it. Monitoring. Monitoring is key. It's the big thing. Your IDSs, your IPSs, your firewalls, they're great. They stop some of the big stuff. They protect you from some of these persistent attacks. But again, let me ask the honest question. Do you know why user Joe at 3 a.m. is logging into the development server when he's an accountant? Or do you even know that he is? Why is your SQL server talking to your domain controller on port 4444 all the time now? Why? Does that normally happen? And for any of you that don't know, 4444 is kind of the standard default port that Metasploit payloads and Meterpreter payloads generally run over, unless that's just kind of the basic willy-nilly. Why is it? Why do these things talk? Why are they doing that? Any of you in here that would detect a SQL server talking to a different server on your environment, other than your web server, on some non-standard port? And could you tell me why it was talking on those non-standard points? If you can't tell me that, if you can't answer that kind of a question, you don't have enough of a profile of your environment to know what is normal and what's not normal. And I'm going to tell you, that's why I say monitoring is the key to this. Because if you cannot see the anomalies in your network, what's going on, you cannot respond to a breach until the FBI or the Secret Service comes, knocks on your door and says, hey, look, we noticed you guys are serving this, or we've traced a credit card leak back to your business. And you're like, well, our IDS, IPS, our firewall hasn't said anything. We're not hacked. How many of you also could detect a rogue device on your network, actually see it, and know, hey, wait, on that port, we just had a new device plug in. Or this device is now a changed MAC address. If you can't see those kind of things, how can you expect to harden your Fort Knox and protect your gold? Now the last couple of them. Lock things down. Lock down your physical locations. Be better about your physical security. Be better about your information security. Don't leave things just open. Don't leave things just running. Make sure users are machines are locking them out. Even if you have to be a stickler and say, 5 minutes of inactive time, we're going to screensaver. Be sticklers about it. Come around and check under users' keyboards. I've had to do that in a very large environment. One of my tasks on a Friday night after users left was to walk around and check keyboards for passwords. You need to check those kind of things. Be sticklers about it. Be harsh. Your job's not to make friends. Your job's to protect those assets. Because, you make friends, that's great. But if it compromises your environment security because of it, it's not worth it. Last, hard work and time. Rome wasn't built in a day. You're not going to harden everything. Go back to your employer today, harden everything down, and we're good. It's going to take time. Start with the most critical. Know where that gold is, start to build your perimeter there, and then continue to build out. But you have to know where you're starting first. Thank you very much. Any questions, comments, things you want to throw at me? Do I need to get running out one of these back doors somewhere? Anything? Yeah? I actually started as an IT And I'll say this, my hat's off to you guys. Having been on that other side and knowing how hard it is to lock down an environment, and you're doing it day in and day out, you have to find everything all the time. I just got to get lucky once, and then I win. Any other questions, comments, concerns?